Hi friends, it's Michelle Maddox. Let's talk about working with guides, with spirit guides. This is a topic that comes up a lot in spiritual work and certainly in ancestral healing work. So what do we mean by spirit guides? Well, really, it's a guide who is in spirit form. So working with spirit guides means tapping into your intuition and working with these different spirit entities who come forth to work with you. Now, you don't want to work with just anyone, right? There's a lot of spirits out there, and a lot of them would love some prime time in your head or some attention that way. So you want to be a little more selective. When we work with ancestral guides, we're reaching out to our own blood ancestors. It doesn't have to be blood ancestors. For ancestral healing work, we usually start with the blood ancestors. And once you have established a connection with a guide and done some of the healing work required to really bring the lineage into good repair, then we look at working with spirits of affinity. And those can be land spirits, they can be plant or animal spirits, they can be elementals, they can be spirits of lineages of interest to you, not necessarily ancestral, but maybe something that you have dedicated yourself to, like a spiritual tradition, ancestors who are wise and know about that tradition. They could be ancestors of religion. Maybe you follow some particular religious belief or order, and you want to tap into ancestors or spirit guides from that lineage. There's a lot of options. And here in Sedona, when I first came here in the heyday of the New Age world, people were working, and still do, with all kinds of spirit guides, like the archangels or various extraterrestrial beings, and so on. So there's no shortage of spirits who can serve as guides, but you want to go for ones that are wise, kind, elevated, vibrant, who really hold a high vibration of love and integrity and kindness, so that the information that comes through is something that you can feel good about, and it's not going to mess with you. That gets into a topic that I'll talk about another time, about ritual safety, how to keep yourself safe and protected, and only allow the spirits in that are wise and kind and loving and elevated, and everybody else needs to stay outside of a boundary that you place for yourself. But we'll talk about that another time. As far as connecting with guides goes, there is no shortage of ones to connect with. The questions are really, are you willing? Are you in a place where you're open to have that kind of connection with spirit beings? And, that can mean psychologically being on board, being willing to conceive even that there are spirit guides out there that you are able to connect with. So that's really the first thing. You have to be willing to go down this path. If you're not willing and you're just sort of like the attitude of, well, prove it to me, I'm not sure that that's the best attitude to come in with. On the other hand, this can be a brand new thing if you're not familiar with working with spirit guides or even your intuition. There can be that element of like, well, I don't even know if this is something that I can do. And this kind of brings us into the second thing. First one is willingness. Second thing is your openness. And that's a little different. Yes, be open to or willing to go down this path. But when I say open as point number 2, I'm referring to open in the sense that you have open channels to be able to connect. You don't have to be special to connect and work with spirit guides. we're all intuitive. It comes with the human package. It's a skill that we all have, even if it's latent within you. It's also a skill that our modern society doesn't really teach us or even admit it exists. And so there can be that element of wondering, like, well, I don't know if I can do this. You know, I see some people connect and it's so easy for them, but I can't do that. I must not be, psychic, or I must not be intuitive, or I must not be plugged in to that kind of wavelength of ability. And maybe you're not, using that skill, but you are intuitive. We all are. And so being open to your intuition means like dusting off those, connection points. It's like finding an old piece of electronic equipment, that's been stored in a garage for years and years, and you want to bring it back and make use of it. You might have to take it apart and kind of polish it and blow the dust off and so forth. So sometimes you have to do that with your own openness, your own intuition. And this is where spiritual practices really come in strong. Spiritual practices like meditation. I also do meditation work. You can visit my website at Sedona meditationexperiences.com to find out more about that work. And I think meditation is such a fantastic way to really blow the dust off of those intuitive receptors, to get in to your inner space, get out of this busy head space where it's really hard for anything to come through with clarity when there's all this noise happening here. And meditation helps you to sink into a deeper part of yourself where you can start to relax your nervous system and let it kind of unwind and begin to reclaim, that more intuitive part of yourself. So meditation is fabulous, as are so many other practices. Coming out in nature, not just coming out to water the garden or whatever, though that's great too, but bringing intention to really open up and connect with something spiritual. And that is in spades in nature. I'm an animist, and that means that I believe in the spirit of all things. I'm out here right now with these beautiful red rocks, the trees, the plants, the insects, all of the things seen and unseen, known and unknown. And I'm honoring them. Before I started this video, I did some prayers and did some greeting work and really, brought myself online to connect with the energy that's around me. So that's another great way, coming out into nature and beginning to practice. Now, what I do with my meditation work is I meditate in nature. So there's two things happening there. Other examples of things that people might do for spiritual work is prayer. If you are a prayer and you are familiar with prayer, you can pray. Ask that you be able to tap into your intuition, that those those intuitive receptors be open. And, if there's anything that you can do to help open them, that be shown to you. There's yoga practice, something a little more physical, where you're moving the body and putting your awareness, in these long stretches and postures and really sinking into that intuitive part of yourself through that physical activity. There's no shortage of ways. I could go on, but it's important to have a spiritual practice where you are consistently coming and working with that openness to the deeper parts of yourself and just being with that. And it's like going to the gym. It really is, you have to kind of build the muscle. And then once it's built, great. Doesn't mean you get to stop and it's forever just going to be there for you. If you stop doing your spiritual practices for a while, you're going to find that they get dusty again. And, you've got to go back to kind of square one and reestablish the practice and sit in meditation or come out in nature or do your spiritual practice. It's called a practice, not because you practice until it's perfect, but because you have it in practice, right? It's something that you're working with all the time to keep it in good shape and to keep those intuitive receptors as open as they can be. So that's what I mean by openness. So you're willing, you're open, and then the third thing is, your technique, right? Like, how are you going to go about this? And there's a whole lot to talk about there. I mentioned ritual safety. That's a very important place to start. You don't want to just go into the spirit realm wide open, like fresh meat for everybody to come and grab a piece of. You need to establish your sovereign space so that you're protected. And what that means is being grounded. It means calling in a spiritual helper to clear your personal space and kind of lend their support to you holding your sovereign space. And it means having a boundary around your space that says, you guys need to stay out arm's length. So if there's going to be some communication, we're going to communicate this far away. You don't get to come and be like right on my lap or right up in my space. So that's a topic I'll go into more depth about next time. But these are the elements that are required to work with a spirit guide. And maybe you've done this your whole life. Some people have worked with guides their whole life. I know for myself, when I moved to Sedona in the late 90s, I started really opening up. I had some big healing experiences that really blew the dust off of my intuitive receptors. And so suddenly I had a lot of, connection to spirit. And I went to a lot of different events, meditations, healings, different group events to learn. And I realized that what people are talking about when they have a spirit guide is something that I had available to me also. I could feel intuition speaking to me, right? Speaking, moving through my emotions, showing up visually. You have to kind of be aware of intuition and the different ways that it's going to work with you when you're working with these guides. For some folks, it's a very clear connection and they just hear it, or they get very strong visuals, or they feel it in their emotion and they kind of have to feel into that connection. Or it's sometimes a knowingness. It's hard to put a nice, neat word to how that intuition is coming through. It's just simply a knowingness. So those are the kind of basic ingredients for working with spirit guides. And with ancestral guides, because they are blood ancestors, I'm going to refer specifically to blood ancestors here. They shared, the same blood, the same DNA as you have within you. And so it's much easier for them to get in. Like there's a kind of a welcome mat at that door, and it's easy for them to get in. A lot of times they already are. It's just a matter of you learning to recognize, the voice or the vibe that a particular ancestor is already communicating with you through. And sometimes that's not there, and you're going to make that connection for the very first time. And that's a big part of this ancestral healing work. And it's a part that, again, may require you to establish some kind of spiritual practice to help you open up those intuitive receptors. So that's a good place to start. You can't just dive right into the deep end without knowing a few things about how to swim first. And the spiritual practices, the meditation, the yoga, the being out in nature, the prayer, those are all ways for you to get really clear, right? So that you can recognize how the spirits are connecting with you. So you can hear those beautiful, wise, loving messages from your spirit guides. All right, friends, that's a big part of what ancestral healing is about, and a big part of what we'll do together if you choose to give ancestral healing a try. So thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Michelle Maddox saying goodbye for now.